BBC Radio Scotland.
This is a podcast from the BBC. I'm Janice Forsyth with my highlight from today's show. Listen to the afternoon show live on BBC Radio Scotland, and if you like to coorie in at Christmas and get cosy while also enjoying being spooked by a ghostly tale, please do not miss my next guest, Mark Gatiss. He has written, directed and also appears in The Amazing Mr. Blunden, which will be on Sky Max and Now TV on Christmas Eve. In this ghost story, we have city kids, teenage siblings Lucy and Jamie, and they embark on an adventure which begins with a visit from a mysterious elderly gentleman, played by Simon Callow, who offers their out-of-work mum a job as the caretaker of a ruined old country house that's said to be haunted. With Mr. Blunden's help, Lucy and Jamie travel back in time to 1821, where they encounter a nasty piece of work, Mrs. Wickens, played brilliantly by Tamsin Greig, and her deliciously creepy husband, played by Mark Gatiss, who'll join me after this.
Look on this as a new start for all of us, okay?
Do you think you would be afraid if you saw a ghost?
We're the first people who haven't run away at the sight of us.
You want us to come back with you? What are we even doing here?
We're going to change the pattern, to change time.
There you go, a wee flavour of Sky Max and Now's Christmas Eve family film, The Amazing Mr. Blunden. And you heard their various voices, including the actors who played the siblings, Zion Habte and Jason Rennie, as sister and brother Lucy and Jamie. I'm really pleased that Mr. Wickens himself has joined me. Mark Gatiss, a very warm welcome to BBC Radio Scotland.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Good to have you here. And we're absolutely getting into the festive vibe with everything that you are up to over this season. And I believe that you saw the original, I think it was it Lionel Jeffries directed the original 1972 film when you were but a nipper.
That's right, yes. I saw it at school on an old projector on the day we broke up for Christmas when I think I was 7. And it was like the perfect film for me. It still is, really.
Yeah.
I love the original film. So it's quite a challenge to do a new version. It felt sort of heretical, but equally, it's such a wonderful story, and a lot of people don't know the original film, and I thought it's quite an exciting thing to remake.
Yeah.
And also I went back to the book it's based on, which is called The Ghosts by Antonia Barber, and in that the two kids are actually from the present day, whereas in Lionel Jeffries' film they're from 1918, so it's a sort of period film within a period film, so I thought that was quite interesting to make them very much from now.
No, it absolutely works, and interesting because Antonia Barber's novel, that's from '69, and then the film that you saw, the original Lionel Jeffries from the '70s, and I think I was very struck from the beginning. I loved it because I've been sort of my guilty pleasure is watching Roald Dahl's Tales of the Unexpected at the moment, and kind of enjoying it at the same time, sort of laughing at terrible sets and all the rest of it. But I wondered how much you've gone for a wee bit of an homage, because the opening music and graphics absolutely had that feel to it.
Oh, very much. I mean, it's a love letter to the original film as well as a reimagining, But also, I grew up so much in that world of Bagpuss and Oliver Postgate and all those things that feel like charm to me. The things, especially at Christmas time, the things that kind of make my hair stand on end are still the same things, and they're sort of. It's a combination of spookiness and fun and adventure and sort of a trace of melancholy as well. Yeah. And I think a lot of those things, like we've done that with the opening titles, and there's a little sequence with a toy theatre, which have that kind of Victorian charm to them, which I think is kind of in the DNA of all these stories.
Yeah, and is it just basically Charles Dickens? Is that really, he's created the DNA?
He did. I mean, I'm doing A Christmas Carol on stage, my own version, which and it's I'm playing Jacob Marley, which is my dream part, and it all goes back to Dickens. He really does. There's a lot of Dickens in Mr. Blunden as well. It's the story. It's a redemption story. Mr. Blunden makes a terrible mistake, and then his ghost comes back to try and put things right, and that's a lot of Scrooge in there too, because and I think the reason these stories resonate so much with us is because we all feel that, the pull of that, and especially at this time of year, the idea of the road you didn't take, or the one that got away, or the decision that changed the rest of your life, and there's a sort of magic in the air. Same with Clarence the Angel, It's a Wonderful Life, the idea of having another go at it, or I think that's very powerful and speaks to us all.
I've often been fascinated, for a long time, by that whole idea. You just mentioned that word melancholy. I always think about that this time of year, because we've just been talking about it there with Carol Ann Duffy and Catherine Williams, who've created a Christmas album which absolutely embraces, misery and hard times and just the reality of it. But as they said, it's almost like a Christmas album that gives you a hug at the same time. So it's a beautiful balancing act.
Absolutely, and I think it always is. I think it's the reason some people recoil from Christmas is the idea of it being sort of enforced jollity.
Yeah.
Whereas in fact, the reality we all know is that it's a combination of things. It's bittersweet, because you inevitably look back to Christmas past and when you were a child yourself, and the people who are not there anymore, and you can't help but be reminded about it in a way that you don't get the same feelings at Easter or in the summer holidays. There's something, because Christmas has such a huge footprint, it just sticks. And therefore we all want the same traditions, we all want the same things to happen, but you can't help looking back as well as forward.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about your adaptation is the fact that we have, the city family, and it's very much reflecting the experience of so many people at this point, especially, as the pandemic continues. But the mum's a musician, but she's got no work, and we actually see her going off to the Social Security to see if there'd be any jobs, and going through that whole experience. I'm making it sound terribly bleak. It's not at all. And the children are just great. They're sassy and interesting, but they are very, very contemporary kids. So tell us a wee bit about just that side of things, putting in that kind of context, if you like.
Well, as I say, I mean, in order to make it worth doing, because as I say, I love the original. I wanted to just sort of reimagine it for a new audience who maybe would never seek out a 50-year-old movie. I thought, well, I make the family very much from our world, and also it's important to remember that they've lost their father, that they're in an accident, they're suddenly out of work, and it's a bit desperate. And I think, as with the eternal resonance of A Christmas Carol, same thing is that it's a world in which people are on the breadline, or people have to go to food banks, and it's not all cozy. So I wanted to sort of reinforce the idea that they're in trouble when they get this magical visitation. And secondly, to root it in our world, and right back to the League of Gentlemen and my experience of job centres. Job centres loom very large in my stuff. So I just thought it was, I didn't want to make it too cosy, and give a sense that they really do need help when Mr. Blunden turns up and offers them this apparently wonderful job out of the blue, with certain conditions attached.
Presumably absolute no-brainer to cast Simon Callow, who also has huge connections to Dickens, he's done his one-man shows over the years and knows Dickens inside out.
Oh yeah, well, I've known Simon for a very long time. He was in my first Doctor Who. That's where we met, and playing Charles Dickens, amazingly. So it was an absolute no-brainer, as you say, but also I couldn't imagine anyone else playing Mr. Blunden. He sort of embodies Christmas. Although the interesting thing is, it's the first time he's grown a full beard since 4 Weddings and a Funeral. And he looks fantastic. He looks like Santa Claus now. Yeah. And he hated having a full beard. He hated it. And I said, you've never looked more cuddly. But he didn't like it at all. He as soon as he could, he took it off and ran off to Mykonos.
Poor sight. Oh, there you go. From one extreme to another. I blooming love it. I love it. And I guess that's the thing, isn't it, about in terms of the casting, because you mentioned League of Gentlemen, because you and Tamsin, there is fun here too, because for me, one of the things, and it's like you're igniting the little kid in me, because it's the sheer joy of what you can do with the whole idea of people seeing ghosts and not seeing ghosts, and the fun and the tricks and all the nonsense you can get up to. So I think that must have been fun, although a lot of that presumably is done in post-production. But I wondered about, for you and Tamsin Gregg, just playing, sort of like thinking of League of Gentlemen, utter grotesques. I mean, you are utterly ghastly in this, aren't you?
There's nothing like it. I mean, people. It's a cliche to say actors always say, "Oh, it's better to play villains," but of course it is. But we had a brilliant time. Tamsin I've never worked with before, and it was just we just had gotten so well. She was brilliant, so kind and helpful. I had to do that and obviously direct it, and we only had 6 weeks to do it. It was a very tight schedule. We had the fire and everything, but she was boundlessly helpful and such a laugh. I mean, so we just kind of conspired in our silliness together, and we looked like I said I wanted Tamsin to look like a kind of like a sort of chess piece, like narrow shoulders and like an Edward Gorey illustration that I think we both do, look like we're sort of scratched out of ink, and like two black crows,
Oh, she did it magnificently.
It's big shoes to fill because of the great Diana Dawes performance in the original, but she's brilliant, and she's so frightening too. She's properly frightening.
She is,
and
absolutely.
We've had a couple of screenings with children watching, and they're really frightened.
Excellent.
Which is kind of ideal, isn't it?
Result. Mark Gatiss up the back, punching the air while that's happening. And we must mention the music, because it was composed by Scottish composer Blair Mow, who we had on the show a few weeks ago, and performed by the RSNO in their new studio in Glasgow. And of course, we know it's a given. Score is so important for the atmosphere, and particularly in something like this. Did you have a clear idea what you were looking for? Is that an interesting collaborative process that you enjoy?
Yes, I've worked with Blair many times. He's absolutely fabulous. And the really tough thing here was the original score is by Elmer Bernstein, who was amazingly out of work and living in England when this small children's film came up. I think he met Lionel Jeffries at a party. He said, "Sure, I'll do it." And it's a brilliant score, famous score. And so I had to say to Blair, "No pressure. You've got to follow Elmer Bernstein." But he really has. It's such a beautiful score. It's magnificent. It's sweeping. It's very moving. And it was brilliant for him to record up there, and I believe that they did the original too. So not the same people, but the same orchestra, which is rather fantastic. And we also got permission from Bernstein's son to quote a little bit of the original. So it all came together very, very perfectly.
That is terrific. Well, you've already established how blooming busy you are with everything that you're up to, but there's also the small matter of on Christmas Eve again, M.R. James, the mezzo tint. So, I mean, I think anyone who's into ghost stories and suspense is a fan. You're a major fan of M.R. James, aren't you?
Oh, yes. And so I've been lucky enough to do, this is my fourth, I think, to sort of revive the semi-regular tradition of the Christmas ghost story on the BBC. And this was postponed from last year. So we shot this in February, and it's been waiting for Christmas. So it's the story of Rory Kinnear plays a sort of fusty museum curator who he gets he buys this picture of an engraving of a country house, but it seems to be perfectly ordinary, but every time he looks back at it, it's slightly different. And then he sees this figure on the lawn. It's one of James's most famous stories, and I'm very, very pleased with it. I've just ended up with this. It's like 3 buses at once, but it's been my ghostliest year ever. Only because of COVID, everything has been moved to this year. And so it's been Christmas for me literally since January. Well, and also I have been visited by 3 spirits myself.
All right, okay. Well, look, we're delighted at your extraordinarily prolific output, even if for you it's been formed over a longer period of time. Really a joy to speak to you, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too, Mark Gatiss there. And so just to recap, The Amazing Mr. Blunden, that's on Sky Max and now on Christmas Eve at 7 o'clock. And that BBC Two ghost story, the M.R. James one, the mezzo tint, you can watch that on BBC Two at 10:30, also on Christmas Eve.
The best in books, film, arts and music.
The Afternoon Show with Janice Forsyth on BBC Radio Scotland.
That was my pick from today's show. Thanks for listening.